I'm not. Okay. All right. Absolutely. Are we ready? Okay.
Ready? On.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Welcome. This is the City of Groton Special Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, April 11th, 2022. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Present, we have Mayor Keith Hedrick, Deputy Mayor Guinevere Depot, Councilor Lisa McCabe, Councilor Paul Norris, Councilor Stephen Sheffield, City Clerk Megan Peters, Director of Finance Ron Uhas, and excused today, we have Councilor Christine Piazza and Councilor Rashad Carter.
Okay. Thank you. So the line items we're going to be talking about tonight is 690, city budget presentations. The first budget up for review is human resources. And that is, let me get you to the page, that is on page 24. And with that, I'll turn it over to Linda.
Thank you. And thank you, Councilors and Mayor. And all of the wonderful people. Okay, I have one of the largest budgets in the city. Kidding? I've got nothing, so it'll just take me 10 minutes. All right? Do you want me to go through each line to tell you why the increases are there and?
Nope.
No?
Give an overview
Okay,
of the budget, and then we'll open it up to council for discussion.
all right. It looks like my budget's been increased by 2.19% this year. We have added, I guess, most of the expense to our professional development line item. We are trying to make people, especially new people coming in and existing employees, feel more like they're really cared about here at the city and GU. And so we've allocated some money this year for developing a new employee development staff improvement plan. And also we've got to continue training our managers. We had management training last year, which worked out really well, and we want to continue to do that. Also, there was an events committee that was put together this year, and GU has offered to split a budget item with us for that. We're each going to be putting money into a plan so that we can, again, bring people together, have activities, especially bring together the people from Groton Utilities in with the city of Groton. Some people don't ever even see each other. We used to have quarterly breakfast meetings. We're not going there at all, but we are looking to maybe having semi-annual coffee meetings instead to bring people together. And we used to also do at that time sort of a State of the Union, State of GU, and just talk about things and talk about people who've gotten awards for different either length of service or for special safety events that they came upon and took care of. Contracted services, I dropped down about $10,000 from that particular line item. We have no negotiations this year, thank the Lord. And so I don't believe that we will have to put in as much money as we did last year for this year's budget, but it'll probably come back next year because negotiations start again next November. And let's see. I believe, and as far as our labor costs are, 3%. That's what was allowed this year, and our staff each got the 3% if that gets passed. And that's really all I have.
Okay, questions from the council? Deputy Mayor Depot.
Well, I just want to say, I know that we talked in the past about the events committee and spending more money on things for the staff. I am always a proponent, happy employees do a better job. That's always the case. So I'm really glad that we're moving in that direction. The professional development, can you give some examples of what that's going to be? Like, is that classes or is that,
Yes, it actually is most of the time, they're webinars. We have some live training, but not always. So the things that we're looking at, you know, a lot of people come in here and, for customer service, or anybody who's at the front desk of any of the departments, how to deal with conflict, how to deal with angry customers, how to resolve issues. Also, we have, for the managers, performance reviews. They're not all really, I guess, trained to do good performance reviews, so they don't always mean a lot. So we're trying to get them better at that. Also, we have to have certain trainings done as reasonable suspicion, especially now with marijuana being legalized. We're going to be training that again. We did it a couple of years ago. We're going to be training it again for everyone to recognize the signs of someone who is under the influence, and how to use the form that we give people to go through and assess different parts, you know, how they look, how they talk, how they walk, all that kind of thing. And everybody needs that again.
Had sexual harassment training in the past, and we'll
Yeah, that one
continue
is,
working on workplace violence, those kind of things as well.
correct. Sexual harassment is every 2 years. It's mandated.
But
So
the management training, if I may just interrupt real quick, is important to me because when we looked at this, we have managers that have been here for a while, and municipalities, a lot of them don't tend to train their managers and train people how to be managers. And so we're trying to do that with, you know, one with discipline, but even more importantly with that, how to work with your employees, how to make sure that we're getting the most out of the employees, working with them, making a good working environment and those kind of things. And we've been successful.
how to be a coach,
that.
which is very different than being a boss, and a lot of them don't get that. And I've seen some changes in that also. So I think definitely it has worked, what we've done so far, so.
Please.
kind of random question that I believe that our former clerk, Patrick, was a notary. Do we have someone else in the building that is a notary?
Sure.
And we offer that service to residents?
Noemi's a notary.
Okay.
Yep, and you're a notary, and there's Val. Yep. Yep.
And just so you know, Denise Fisher just went through and passed the exam to be a notary. She's just waiting for the final paperwork.
And I'm thinking someone in
Missy over in the
customer
police department is a
Okay.
notary.
Okay, so, well, because that
And the new
would,
clerk
that
will
would-
be
oh,
a
good.
notary as
That
well.
would seem to fall under professional development as well, I would think, maybe, or,
Is there still a class that you have to go to for that?
I think there's an
it was
annual
just-
fee, I
you just-
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a test to submit, paperwork to submit to become a notary.
So if city residents, I know this is a little off budget, but if city residents need something notarized, can they just come here and get it notarized? And is there a charge?
Yes, they come in all the time, actually. Notary is something we're very busy with. It's $5 per signature. We're open Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. till 4 p.m., and there's always a notary here who can help you. There are 2 of us at the clerk's desk that are notaries.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Any other counselor? Counselor Norris?
Can you explain, I guess it's on page 27, the bounce in full-time employee line? It says current year, and it gives a dollar figure, 217, then estimated 241, then back down to 225. So I'm trying to figure out what is that bounce, and then if that is just pay, I think that's a 3.5. Is that what city staff is going with?
That's just salary, it's not overtime, or is overtime included in that? It's not. So we're looking at the accrual rate throughout the rest of the year that goes up to 241? That's what you did? That's what? Okay. It could be, I'm not positive, but it could be because we have an HR generalist who I brought in 3 years ago almost, and she had just gotten her master's, and so we brought her in at the base. She's turned out to be an unbelievable asset to the department. So we have given her a small merit increase. I don't think that's the answer to this whole thing, though. There's definitely not, there's not all of that in that 241,000. To tell you the truth, I really don't know why there's such a big difference and why it goes, well, I know why it goes back down again, because that's what it is. So I'm not sure
Right.
what goes into that 241, but I would love to find out and let you know.
But the 221 to 225, to answer your question, let me answer your question this way. My direction for all, so we have contract employees, they will get whatever's negotiated with the contract. Non-contract employees, what we've done in the past is we've said, okay, we're gonna do the same thing with you guys. What I'm finding is that, that has become an issue with some of my non-contract folks. So what we're doing this year in an effort to help keep them is my direction was 3% raise for non-contract labor
Okay.
this year.
Paula,
I don't know if that answers your
Yes,
question
he
or
does.
not.
Yeah.
Counselor Norris, I apologize for not knowing that. I got this just today, so I didn't have time to match up the numbers, which I would like to do, but I'll find out for you.
No, I was just thinking maybe there was another for this year, there may be
Oh.
another part-time person
We did
thrown
bring
in
in
there.
someone, thank you. Thanks for reminding me. We did bring in a file clerk to
Okay.
catch up on a lot of filing that we had and scanning to do. Yes, we did.
So that would add on to,
That could
that's
be it.
why that
Yep,
bump would be
That's why
there.
that bump, yep,
And that's why the bump is not gonna stay for next year.
no,
Okay?
Got it. Thank you.
Takes a
Thank you.
village. Anything, any other counselor? Any other questions or comments on HR budget? Okay, that's it. Thank you, Linda. Okay, building and zoning is next, it's on page 34. Starts on page 34. Yep, you're up for bid, so go ahead.
Okay, for the counselors that don't know me, my name is Joe Summers, the building and zoning official for the city of Groton. I just want to give a little background on some of the accomplishments that the department has achieved over the past year. One of the things that we've done is, as of January 3rd of this year, we went to 100% online permitting for the submission of applications, documents. That is actually 6 months ahead of schedule as to what I anticipated. Part of that was due to COVID, so fewer people coming in, so it was easier to do the transition. Some of the other major things we've accomplished over the past year, and actually we're still working on, is records retention, reorganizing of the file storage, and scanning archived documents. That's a project that's been ongoing for apparently many, many years within the city, and we're continuing that, and we actually have a part-time staff person attempt to help achieve some of that scanning and reorganizing of the documents, because it is a very time-consuming process. We've also done some upgrades with technology to assist us with the online permitting by the purchase of tablets for use out in the field, for tracking inspections and permits and who has applied for permits and all that, so it makes it easier instead of calling into the office all the time and trying to find out who's done permits and not. So before you is the budget request, which is a continuation budget for the upcoming fiscal year. For this current fiscal year, we budgeted for revenues of $1 million. As of March 31st, we're about 85% of that value. And by the end of April, we will exceed that $1 million revenue projection, so we are above anticipated. On page 37 of the financial plan, estimated year end in there is $935,039. The way finance tracks revenues and the way I track revenues is a little different. My numbers are based on the fees paid when the permit's issued, whereas when we receive monies, that gets deposited, so there is a little discrepancy always in that because sometimes projects take a couple weeks or a couple months before it's even issued after it's been paid. So there will be a little discrepancy on that. So for the next fiscal year, budgeting revenues of roughly $600,000, and that is a conservative number because we do have several projects that are in the pipeline. Just don't know if they're going to land on this fiscal year or carry over into next fiscal year because they're supposed to be coming in around the June, July timeframe. And to give you an idea, $600,000 in permit fees equates to approximately $40 million worth of construction. And I anticipate about $35 to $40 million over the next 3 to 4 months coming in, based on activities and discussions we've had with clients around the city. So before you is my recommended budget, and I'm just going to go over some brief line items. Increase in the office supplies and advertising by $500, and some of this is due to with the wide format printer scanner. We're still at the very beginning stage, so I wanted to bump that up a little bit in case we had to accrue some printing charges. So right now, this is just a budget number. Once we get a year into this, we'll be able to hone in on that more and have a better understanding of where our expenditures will go on that line item. And decreasing in the utility and fuel by $500, since the department has newer vehicles, and I've looked at past trends and the fuel efficiency of our current vehicles, I feel comfortable by reducing that $500. And requesting an increase in the reserve fund equipment by $2,000, which is for future replacement of vehicles. Our department has 2 vehicles, and this number is based on a 10-year replacement cycle. Hopefully, we can stretch it out to 12 to 15 years, but if we bump it up from 5,000 to 7,000, about 11-year mark should work out depending on cost of vehicles in the future. So it's a guess right now. And last major item is under the Historic Review Commission, reduction of the contractual services by $2,000. Again, this is based on previous fiscal year expenditures, and I do not anticipate any major legal actions or any needs coming up. We will be reviewing the historic preservation regulations and all that, but that'll be done in-house, so I don't anticipate any major expenditures incurred on that. So with that said, that's pretty much my whole budget. One item that we did do is the zoning enforcement category, which is mainly geared for the Zoning Board of Appeals, is going to be turned over to the city planner, since the city planner is the staff liaison to the ZBA. So it just made more sense to have her control those accounts instead of funneling everything through me and being a middleman on that. So with that, any questions?
Okay, before I turn it over, Ron?
I'm going to anticipate one question, and it's going to be the contractual services. That's decreased by the $310,000. So just to kind of bring back the history, when a large construction project was going, we weren't sure if we were going to need to outsource some inspection services. And when those permit fees came in, we built into that year's budget $1.2 million for contractual services in case we needed to go outside. We since hired somebody internally to do those, but it's not a guarantee that that individual will stay, but we hope they will through the end of the project. So each year, we reduce that contractual service amount by what we think we need in order to complete that project. And it's paid for using the surplus of fund balance from that year that we received it. So I just wanted to talk about that one thing. And then the other piece, the counts that Joe was just talking about, those that were handed over to the planner are still in the boards and commissions in the building piece. We just didn't move them in the budget. So they're still in the same spot in the budget.
With no changes in those line items.
Councilor McCabe?
Yes, thank you for that.
We knew it was going to come up.
Yeah, and I just wanted to commend you for getting the online permitting in place ahead of schedule.
Yeah, it was a major
Just-
accomplishment.
Yeah, just so I understand, so if I wanted to put a new deck on my house and, I can just do all that
Yes.
submit online?
Yes, you can, if you're a first-time user, you just log in and register. It does a email verification to make sure it's a valid email address. Once that's done, you can go in, fill out the application, enter all the information. It'll tell you what the fee is. We are working on doing online payments. So hopefully we'll have that coming soon, and you'll be able to attach documents to the application. So when you do that, we get a notification automatically in the office,
Okay,
so.
very nice, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other? Deputy Mayor Depot?
Under the financing plan, it says that $15,000 comes from a development and beautification fund. Can you explain where that is from?
That is the same fund that the donations come out of. And what that is to pay for the blight officer. A portion of the blight officer is transferred in from that beautification fund. It's a special revenue fund.
So this $15,000 is part of paying the blight officer?
But it's transferred in from the special revenue fund that we received the CMEC generator revenue in.
Okay,
And it was, the thought process was to, instead of the taxpayers paying for all of the blight officer out of taxes, that fund would fund a portion of the blight officer's wages. So it's just transferred in from another fund. That's not
so the blight
Taxes.
officer is paid under this budget?
correct.
Is he the? Which line does he
You-
fall under?
You won't see him in the full-time equivalents because it's a part-time position.
Yeah,
So-
under cost center, we have building inspection, inquiries, assistance, zoning, plan review, general support. Pretty much all of our salaries, percentages come out of those multiple line items.
So is it not under part-time employees? Is that?
A portion of it is part-time. There's other part-time in there as well.
Yeah.
I guess my question is it only part of the blight officer's salary coming out of this budget?
Yes.
Because now that's confusing. Because, so the $15,000 is part of the blight officer's salary?
So all the blight officer's expenses and salary come out of this line item. A portion of it is funded by that special revenue fund as opposed to being all funded by taxes.
Okay. So it's a portion of it, it's not the whole thing?
Right, it comes in from a different fund, so that way it's not all being paid for out of the taxes, if that makes.
Yes,
Okay.
that makes more sense. Thank you.
Anything else? Councilor Norris?
Thank you. So under page 38, what does it say there? Contract services. Oh, wait a minute, I apologize. Page 37, general support, that reduction between current budget, 990, and the proposed for 23, that's the same rationale behind the contract services? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then, just for educational purposes, for my noggin here, so what's the mechanism, what's the process for vehicle replacement? So is it each year there's money allocated in the annual operating budget that is then taken out and put somewhere else and just sits there until it's time?
So this is the opposite of what happens with the blight officer. So, so it gets budgeted each year like that, and then it gets moved over to the capital reserve fund, and then it sits in the capital reserve fund until the vehicle is purchased.
Okay, please don't scream out of order. But do all the departments replace their vehicles using the same process?
We've tried to move to this process as
Okay.
opposed to waiting to the year that it needs to be replaced and then having the one-time jump and then
Yeah,
back down.
okay.
So it's tried to levelize it. There have been years where we haven't been able to do any capital work.
Right.
So we're trying to build up these replacement funds so that way in the 10-year, 15-year, whenever that vehicle needs to be replaced, there's funds to replace it, and then
Got it.
it'll keep continuing on.
Got it. Thank you.
Sometimes, let me address this real quick, because when I first come in I was a counselor and I understood all that. I come in as the mayor and I said, nope, we need to do something else. And what we looked at was, did we want to go like, for example, the town where they have a fleet fund? And we talked about that and we said, well, do we do the fleet fund for everybody? And if we do that, how do you do that? Right? Because, what do you got? You got 3 vehicles?
Yes.
You have 3 vehicles, they have 20-something vehicles, police got, 20-some vehicles. Fire department's got, I don't know, 15 vehicles, but 2 of their vehicles are over $1 million to replace. So, how do you do, and if you're gonna make it work right, you need to have the fiscal discipline in the mayor's position and in council. And what I have seen in the past is that fiscal discipline's not always there. When things get tight, you start cutting capital. So the way that we do it here is, and we are getting more toward where we're putting money aside, but the reason we're able to do it is because we have it, right? There probably will come a time in the future years, hopefully not, but in the future years, that we may have to either stop doing that and then fund it all in one year, or cut back on the amount that we put in. So I realize it's different than, because there are different municipalities do it different ways. And but this is how we do it, and it works for us. But I understand your concern on it. Go ahead.
Boards and commissions. Is the harbor master a paid position in the city?
I'll answer that. Harbor master gets a stipend
Okay.
from the state.
From the state, got it.
Now, and I don't know if we're still doing this, so if I'm talking
I know
out of
we
school.
reimburse him for any
Okay.
out-of-pocket expenses.
So when I was the chair of the Harbor Management Commission, we got the harbor management plan in place, and we started finding money for out-of-pocket expenses, because the stipend's only like $600 a year. It's not very much. The permit fees are supposed to be in a special fund, according to the Connecticut General Statute and according to the harbor management plan that we have here. I was told, yep, we're good to go, we're doing that, then come to find out we really weren't, we're putting it in the general fund. When I found that out, we are now putting the money where it belongs, which is in the harbor management fund, put aside so that Harbor Management Commission can do other projects out there, like the no-wake zones and those kind of things. Now, those buoys we got from EB, but nonetheless, to have some money there so that they can do some things, like
Got it.
GIS mapping and other stuff, projects they had on their list. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does, it does. All right. The last question was, because leading up to that was, in looking at boards and commissions that fall under planning or building and zoning here, I didn't see any, but now I guess you did answer the question, any expenditures for harbor management. So your answer, you answered me, but.
Correct, everything is flowing through
Yeah.
that other special revenue fund where all the
Exactly.
revenues are coming through.
Right, and as an example, for the next fiscal year, and probably part of this fiscal year, we are gonna start seeing some expenditures on the contractual services line, because the Harbor Commission is going to be reviewing the harbor management plan and looking at updating that, so we're gonna have to reach out to some legal counsel and things like that and get some direction on some things.
Any other questions on this?
No, but can I make a comment?
Sure.
If you don't mind? I want to say thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
The word on the street is that building and zoning is extremely responsive, and getting back to folks in a timely manner, and not only telling people what's in black and white, but helping them understand with the written word. So I just wanted to say thank you to you
I
and
appreciate
your
that,
folks for that.
that's, that means a lot, because that's the way I want this department, educating the public, instead of being a regulator, we're an educator. So that's what we try. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, before we go, I want to draw your attention to page 37. If you go to the financing plan and look at permits, you'll notice we went from 2,900,000 down to 1 million, down to 600,000. That is going to continue to come down, and at some point, it's going to level out probably around $400,000 in revenue. The reason I bring that up is because the reason we had the permits is because the buildings that are being built. There's a building that's going to be, that will get a CO this year, which is building 604. So in calendar year '22, the revenue or the grand list impact will not be felt until fiscal year '24. So there's a 2-year lag time and delay. The big building, building 600, and the support building in front, 605, I don't remember the CO for 605, 600, they're asking for a spring of next year CO, which means that's fiscal year '23, actually it's calendar year '23, and it will not hit the budget until fiscal year '25.
For both buildings.
For both
600 and
buildings, 605 and 600. Okay? Just, and so what we are doing, I've talked to Director Uhas on this, we lowered the budget this year. The reason we were able to lower the budget is because grand list went up. The average in the city of Groton is around 16%. I realize that some of you probably have outliers and you might have went up more than that, but the average is about 16% that it went up. We came down 15% because I wanted to try to levelize the tax burden and what people were going to have to pay in taxes. We probably could have taken it a little bit lower, but the question that I asked Director Uhas was, is this sustainable? And the answer at the lower rate was no. The answer at this rate is maybe, but it depends on a couple different factors, meaning the revenues for building that two of our major employers are doing and some other factors. But we have, if you look at the general fund, we're 26%. So we're at the high end of where we need to be. We've also put aside some money in reserve so that if we don't use that, we can also tap into that. And if the permit fees hit this year and we're over, that'll go back to the general fund. So the reason I bring all this up is I'm anticipating where that V is, right? When we come down to the normal and up here, so that we don't have to have a catastrophic increase in taxes, because that's not what I want. It's not what anybody wants. So we're trying to manage our way through this, and we're taking a measured approach to it. And if need be, one of the things that Ron reminds me of is that I've had it pretty good here so far and have not had to hammer budgets. We have capital, we're doing projects that the city has not done that's needed to be done. We are actually getting projects done. In the future, if it comes and it comes between raising taxes and cutting capital, we will probably cut capital projects so that the taxes are levelized for the residents, as long as it's not hurtful to the municipality and therefore the residents. So that's why I wanted to take that just quick minute to mention that. Ron? Or Director Uhas?
Just because you're talking about it and on the same topic for the most part, in this year's budget, we've utilized 2.5 million of fund balance. Last year, we utilized 2.6. So, and that's because of the fees that were collected that were over anticipated budget amounts. So we're giving those back because our fund balance is at a higher than where the bond rating wants it at, that 25%, which allows us to give that back and still keeps us at a very good percentage. So I just wanted to point that out, saying we usually don't get into the revenues, but that kind of goes with the revenue piece. With what you're
Absolutely.
talking.
So, and it's important to me that you as the council understand what we're doing, where we're going, and why we're going in this direction. Counselor Norris.
So if I may, so if we were to look back to, let's say, 2018, 2016, do we remember what permitting was? in revenue?
400,000.
400?
Joe,
Okay.
do you have a better answer?
Yes.
Maybe it's not 400. I think it's around 300 to 400,000.
Going back, looking at past fiscal years, and it seems to be 2019 is the pre-EB expansion time. So I anticipate, and in about 2 fiscal years, we'll be back to roughly those levels for the department's budget. The revenues, that's always tough to estimate on a projected period like that, but in 2019, we issued 679 permits, 1,300 inspections on that, and the construction value back then was $35.7 million.
So what was the revenue though?
The revenue.
Because that's what we're talking about, and that's what I think Counselor Norris is interested in.
is
Going back to historic.
in 19, looks like 561.
Okay, so right around 600,000.
Yep. Yep.
And when I talked to Carlton Smith when he was here, we were talking, when this whole thing started, and I'm looking 5, 6 years down the road at this point, we're looking at around 400, 500,000, and anticipating that we would go back to that level, since that's the historic level. So that's what I'm basing all of my, not all, but most of these financial decisions on, when we set and we do wargaming, for lack of a better term, and say, okay, what's my best case, what's my worst case, what do we think, can you forecast? Because one of the things that is totally unpredictable is what our non-departmentals are gonna do. We don't have a whole lot of influence on them, other than maybe some insurance costs, and we've put, we have put issues in place here to focus on safety, which has reduced our workman's compensation numbers, and that helps with our benefits as well and our costs. So, anything else you want to add, or you want me to stop?
Just as a global across the board with mention on departments, mentals, you'll see in most departments, a 5% average increase between pension, health insurances, and those types of things. So you'll see that globally across the board. There may be some that are a little bit different based on actual or known changes, but for the most part, it was a 5%.
But I will tell you, the year, what year am I in now? 5. I think 3 years ago, when the nation had a bad series of hurricanes, our insurances went up because of them, right? If you can,
So
am I speaking out of school again?
no, that we have 2 flood insurance policies that are pre-policies to our regular policy. It's kind of, and those have significantly increased over the years. They had been increasing, and that's directed by the federal and FEMA. That's just been even before the storms that I believe that were Houston. And I think that was the night we came to council going to self-fund.
Ron and I had talked about coming to council with, we were going to come to council with a proposition about, instead of paying for insurance, we were going to set aside the same amount in another account, because you don't need the insurance until you need it. And then when you need it, you need it badly. Because we have an insurance to pay the deductible on one of our other insurances, because the deductible is that high. And so we were going to come to you, and then there was a storm that come in and just wiped out Houston. And so Ron come to me that night and said, okay, you still want to go to council with this? And I said, no, there's no way I could convince, I couldn't even convince me at that time to do that. There was no way I was going to be able to convince the council to take that leap of faith. So that's it. Anything else for Joe? Because he's ready to go. All right. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. Good job.
All right. Next is fire. That starts at 58.
And on fire, I did give you a handout to replace one of the pages that did have a
Yeah.
handwritten amount still on it.
All right, Chief, it's all yours.
All right, good evening. So you have in front of you my proposed budget. It's a 3.18% increase from last year. As far as financing plan, obviously we don't generate any funds, so most of the plan comes from the general fund. We do bring in some money from West Pleasant Valley Fire District because we cover them for fire and fire marshal services. So that is handwritten. Is that what you changed? 400,000. Ron works that out. That's a formula, I believe.
Yeah, that was up, just the formula was done after we had done the original budget, and it looked like that we're gonna increase the revenues from West Pleasant Valley based on the grand list prior to BAA. We haven't gotten the final ones yet, because it takes that into account in the formula.
Right.
All right, on page, excuse me, 61, I'll touch on a couple of things, and then at the end, obviously, you can ask any questions that you have. Full-time employees, you can see that was a little bit of an increase. That's actually 2 years' worth of raises. Last year, when I came before the council, we were in negotiations. So we've flat leveled that line item so as not to tip our hand, or, you don't want to budget, and then they come and say, well, you already budgeted. So that was a 2.5% for the budget year we're in, and then a 2.25% contractual raise for the budget 23. Overtime, you might just notice the numbers. That's a moving target every year. I do anticipate we'll be over that this year. I do anticipate also we'll have funds in the budget, but that line item will go over. And that just encompasses all, we have a contractual minimum of 4. So there's 4 people on duty, 24/7, 365. That's contractual. And we had somebody on workers' comp. We had a vacancy, and we also had added costs due to COVID. Just people calling out sick, whether they got their booster shots, contracted COVID, had children who had COVID, so that drove that number up. We are, I'm happy to say, at full staff. The gentleman on workers' comp came back today, and then we put a new employee in, and he is on shift right now. He started 2 weeks ago on shift. So we are at full staff, so that should help level that out. Thus the reason next year I'm asking for the same I asked for this year. Most of the numbers that you see below that are all contractual. Stipends, the safety incentives, the clothing allowance, sellback of time off, all those things are contractual. If you go a little farther below that, the insurance, pension, OPEB, those are all obviously dictated from finance. We did a 5% increase, I believe, across the board to cover the increase for the year. When you get into operational expenses, it went up a little bit in fire marshal, $1,000. That's due to software that we're going to have to purchase to track our fire calls. We're obligated under the federal government to apply for any grants or anything we have to do reporting. The company we use was sold. Newer and better version is coming, and that costs more money, so, as usual. So there's that increase. Contractual services, you see that went down 10,000. That is lawyer fees. We do not have many, that's why you see that number so low. It's usually $10,000 a year, $20,000 in a negotiation year. So we're not in a negotiation year, so that's the 10. The $100,000 is a placeholder that we've had, I think you had talked earlier, with the construction at Electric Boat. There are additional costs. We did use some of that money a few years ago for outside review of plans, just because they're so large that we don't have the expertise to do that. And then some of that money, you see the buildings going up, so the deputy chief does most of our fire inspections, but has the normal fire inspections, and the new 600 assembly building is getting to the point now where we will start to do inspections. The building department's already there. They inspect the concrete, the steel, things that we don't really involve ourselves in. But now, when they start to build the lockers and locker rooms and the stairwells, the sprinklers, all those things, we are involved. So we have that money there if we need to either hire outside services, or we do have contractually the ability, our captains are fire marshals, so we can use them in an overtime capacity, or hire somebody to cover their shift while they do inspections. So we do anticipate that the inspections will pick up now that we are nearing completion for those buildings. For a couple down, we have vehicle operations. That went from $35,000 to $40,000, and that's just due to the fact that the last 3-4 years, we've consistently gone over. And that's fixing the trucks, that's buying tires, that's oil changes, all those things that just, the price keeps going up. Below that is $200,000 for reserve fund equipment. That is capital fund. So much like Ron was talking, we have a fleet of 9 vehicles, everything from a car, cars, to, not counting boats, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. We do have 2 boats. And then ladder truck, which, to replace right now is, 1.5 million, 1.7 million, somewhere in that range. To replace an engine is $800,000, somewhere in that range. So the money in that account is approximately $30,000 for smaller vehicles, cars. So the deputy chief's car was replaced a couple years ago. I will be coming before the council here, hopefully in 2 weeks, to replace my car. And also, operationally, we changed a few years ago. We used to run 2 engines and a ladder truck all the time with a reserve engine. And we changed operationally to run 1 engine and 1 ladder truck with a reserve engine due to the manpower that we have. So in doing that, we also then run 2 vehicles. So we have an old Ford Expedition that we run out of headquarters and a Ford F-350 pickup truck out of Company 2 to medical calls to try and cut down on the wear and tear of the large vehicles. We run cars, basically. So part of that money is to replace my car, the deputy's car, and the smaller vehicles. $10,000 of that money I have been putting aside. This is the 3rd year. We need to replace the air bottles for our Scott packs, not the packs themselves, that they do come up a little bit farther down the road, but the bottles all they only have a shelf life of so long, and in another year, they will need to be replaced. That'll be approximately $40,000. We already have 20 in there. I'm asking for 10 this year, 10 next year, and we'll be able to replace them out of that fund. And then after that, there's, $160,000 to try and, I'm not sure how much we have actually totally in there, but it's over with this, it'll be over $500,000, I believe, to try and get to the point where we could buy a truck when it's time to replace them. So our engines are 2005 for the reserve, and although it was refurbed in 2020, for some of you who are on the council, we did quite a bit of work. And then we have an engine that's 2009, and the ladder truck is 2009. You look at 20-year replacement, maybe on the engines, and 25 on the ladder trucks. So those two being so close together, we're trying to get ahead of having to bond all that money come that time.
Right. So it's a good news, bad news story. We repaired the one truck. It wasn't this council, it was the previous council, repaired the one truck. The good news is it took it out to end of life, extended the end of life. The bad news is two very expensive trucks now have end of life within 18 months of each other. So one of the things that I did when we first started here was with the extra revenue that we had, was we wanted to put aside money to help go after that instead of having to bond both those trucks. Right now, the trucks, 20-year life, they certainly fall within bonding projects. So you could do that. But I thought that it would be fiscally responsible to set aside money and try not to touch the money and use that money to offset so that if you did have to bond, the bond would be smaller and you could still replace the trucks. So that's why we've been putting aside money at the amounts that we were. Before that, we weren't, because we didn't have it to do that. So, Chief, please continue.
That's it. That's the bottom of you see the overall budget.
Okay.
With the increase, if there's any questions, I don't know.
Questions for the chief? Deputy Mayor Depot.
Thank you, Mayor. The salaries for captain are going up quite a bit. You have 3 of those, right?
3 captains, correct? Yep.
Can you just talk about why that's going up so much compared to the other salaries?
Are you looking on, well, it's contractual 2.5%. So everybody receives a 2.5%. Obviously, the people who are paid at a higher rate, that 2.5% equates to, right? So 2% of the 100,000 would be 2,000. 2% of 50,000 would be 1,000. So that gap grows between the captains and the firefighters.
Right, but when I do the math, it's 7.88%.
There may be just been a true up there. The way that the chief does he factors each person in there, and I think I didn't get the updated one, so these may, I think I just grabbed the rate out of the contract, so it may have been trued up from the prior year. But these current year wages are based off of the new contract. I'll go back and double check it, but I think it was a true up. I think last year was under budget for that line.
So
It's just the allocation.
so which line are you saying is incorrect?
I'm gonna go back and double check it, but it could have been the 22 budget of the 243,850. But I'm gonna double check that and see if that was under.
Okay.
I'll get back to you on next Monday on the
What,
allocation.
so captain on page 62, is that what you're asking?
Correct. That's a 7.9% increase.
Okay. The 263.70 is correct. That's what I have for next year, 3 captains at $87,690.45. I'm not sure. The 243, I don't have in front,
So I guess this is a question for Ron. So does this not import the budget from last year directly?
It does, but the allocation in last year's budget could have been off. The total is accurate, but it may have just been off. I just need to go double check it, but this is how it was allocated last year. But I'll get back to you on Monday on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would, now that I'm thinking of it, if you remember at the very beginning, last year, we flat funded because we were in negotiations. So this year, it's not a in the 2022 budget, no raises were put in there. There should have been a 2.5% per contract put into the budget, but it was not because we were still negotiating when I came before the council. So for 2023, I had to put in a 2.5% raise, and then a 2.25 on top of that 2.5% raise in order to come up with the proper budgeted amount. Am I making myself clear? So normally, and we didn't have to actually last year, somewhere there's money in the general fund that would then be put into the budget to cover the raises last year. I had money left over in the budget at the end. Some of these contractual services, if I don't use that money, it comes back into the city, general fund at the end of the year.
I just think last year's budget numbers is off, because if you look at the actuals, it's 249, so it's even more for 21. So I think it was just an allocation issue last year, but like I said, I will look into that and verify.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Counselor McCabe? Go ahead.
I'm just curious about the line, pension volunteer. Do we give pensions to volunteers?
We do not. We have two line items that are kind of left over from when we did have volunteers. So is that $1,100?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know it's a small amount, I was just curious.
Right, no, so we have, years ago, they started a pension for volunteers. If they made a certain amount of calls over a certain amount of years of service, they would get a small pension. We still have that, and there are some people collecting, and there are some people who are eligible to collect way down the road. So it's funded, it's fully funded, but actuarially, somebody maintains that. And so there's a fee every year for that service. So, we've had discussions. I'm not an actuarial. I almost wonder if it's better to get rid of it, bring the money back, and literally just pay the pension, make a line item, because they're small. I mean, it's, $50 a month, $100 a month, something in that range. So, or buy them out, that might be something again, somebody who's smarter than me with numbers would be able to say, hey, well, we could offer them X amount of dollars today, for a Hamburger Tuesday. So, but that's where that money comes from, and I have to pay the actuarial. So I'll keep that in there. The other 1,000 that's in there that I don't know that it'll be used is really just a placeholder. Again, we don't have volunteers anymore. Both companies have, Company 2 has sunset and they've closed their books. Company 1 is still technically on the books. The city is not. They have their own entity, but they haven't filed for years. And I'm working with some of the old volunteers to try and close those books because they still have an account and things like that. And although it's not us, and it still kind of touches us, and I don't like that liability. So we're working on clearing out their stuff, keeping the history because it's very important, but trying to close out those books. So that's what that $1,000 for. If there's anything we need to pay for to get rid of that liability.
Counselor Norris? Oh, I thought you had your hand up.
I did not.
Okay, sorry. Counselor Sheffield?
Yes, would that 2.25 be retroactive pay that would be added to the 2023 budget that during the negotiations, and then once it's settled, there's back pay that is due to the firefighters at that point?
No, the contract is agreed upon, and so that 2.25 is the raise they'll receive starting July 1.
Okay.
HR will, send it to finance, and they get a 2.25 raise on July 1, 2022.
And then the 2.5
Was last year.
well, that's what I said. So
Right.
last year, 2.5.
The firefighters have already received the raise.
Okay.
And I don't even think we had a retro because we settled before July 1st, or if there was a small gap there, they would have received their retro pay.
Okay.
I just did not fund it last year in that line item because, like I said before, we don't want to say, hey, we already funded it a 2.5. And they'll say, ooh, we'll take a 2.5. So we fund it flat. This year, though, I have to catch up to get the right number.
What happened, yeah, because you pay them, that salary goes, then you go into the next year, that's on top, and that's where these numbers are coming from, right? That's why it looks larger.
Yes.
Okay, Counselor Norris?
Yeah, I do remember you saying that last year. I think what threw us off was in the estimate line, it says the exact same as the budgeted number. So I think that's what threw some folks off, but neither here nor there.
I put the estimates in there. They're not always, I'm kind of estimating. So I wasn't thinking,
Yeah.
you're right, you're absolutely right, that estimate's wrong.
One is have we ever sold a truck, a ladder truck or anything else to some other community?
There's one right over in the side lot if you'd like it.
I'll drive it down-
Hopefully,
I'll
we're
drive
going
it
to get
down
a
south
purchasing
for you.
agent,
Yeah.
and we're going to send it out to auction.
Sure.
But we auction off our surplus trucks, including that engine.
All right. I kind of have a request, if you don't mind, but it's not something that needs to be done in the near future. Is it possible that we could get inventory of the vehicles you have, the type, year, and mileage, just so we get an idea that, so when you do come back next year and you're looking to
That was next week.
for that $1 million new ladder truck, then we go, oh yeah, we remember that one. The
Well,
big-
for our small vehicles, I could tell you right now, my car is a 2012. It's got 148,000 miles. Ford Expedition. 26-1, which is down the other end, is the old Deputy Chief's car, has 127,000 miles. And then the two vehicles that we run to medical calls, G16 is an old police vehicle. It's a 2005. It's got 132,000 miles. And G26 is our pickup truck. It has 49,000 miles, but it's a 2004. We replaced the body off of the old Chief's car, which used to be a pickup truck, and put it on there. And now we are putting miles on it, and that's one of the things I would like to move back to be a pickup truck and a plow truck, because we plow our own, we plow the fire departments ourselves. So those are our smaller vehicles, and then the larger vehicles, I
Yeah.
already told you. But they're, yeah, I can get with Ron and give you a breakdown on the CIP, because they all are replaced under
Right.
the CIP.
But I'm glad you just threw that out, because it does paint a picture of where you are, so thank you.
Any other questions on the fire budget? Okay, that's it. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Last budget is general government on page 9. So page 11 is legislative policy. It stayed the same. Page 14 is the boards and commissions. And that went up from, where are we? 15.5 to 16.7. And that's an adjustment for the retirement board and actuarial services. So that's why that went up. And then on page 17, citizens' participation. So I'll go through these and we can go back if you have questions. Citizens' participation, you'll see that it went up from 5,500 to 7,000, and that's because we're looking to do additional events. One of the things that we've talked about doing is a parade here in the city. Absolutely, would love to be able to do that. The Fall Festival has gone away. That's kind of been replaced with the Brew Run. But it would be great to do something else here in the city to, in addition to City Day and those kind of things, to recognize city accomplishments and the residents. Also in 23, 120th anniversary of becoming a borough. So we're probably going to do something then. Don't know, the committee hadn't met in a little bit. Okay, moving on to page 20. This is administration. And if you go to page 22, full-time employees, that's a 3%, our 3% increase. And then the benefits went up about $10,000. And then under operating expenses, we're budgeting for an election for next year, which is $15,000. Last one was 13, last one, we had budgeted 13, we went over, so we're budgeting for $15,000. There was a question that was brought up outside of council, but it was like, are you going to budget for a primary? And the answer is no, because you don't typically have primaries. It doesn't mean that we won't have them in the future. And that there is a cost. So when you have a primary, it costs, and it costs around $15,000. So we would have to find that money somewhere. But the $15,000 for the actual election for all of us. So that's the overview. Questions or comments? We tried to keep it as a relatively stable operating budget. Councilor Norris?
So in boards and commissions, increase of $1,700 is for.
What page is that?
Page 16.
Okay. Yep,
Is that part of the,
COLA?
I'm sorry?
No, go ahead.
What is that?
Well, it's the adjustment for the retirement board and actuarial services. Ron, could you explain that a little better?
Yeah, normally that, the only board and commission that hits this account is for the retirement board, and it was just to increase for actuary. And it looks like they increased, the office supplies and advertising, but it's kind of all in the one, but it's really just retirement board related.
Deputy Mayor Depot?
So is it inaccurate to be in the office supplies line?
I think it was some anticipation that there'd be some expenses there, but most likely it'll end up being actuarial related, where it would end up being contracted.
Okay, just seems, if a resident's looking at this budget,
Page are you on?
on 16,
Thank you.
the increase in the boards and commissions is on the office supplies advertising line, but if it's going to contractual services, shouldn't it be on the other line?
I think it got added to the wrong line.
Yeah, it got added to the wrong line.
When it was being prepared, the original worksheet, and, because you can see the actual for 21 is 15,307, so there was an anticipation of that increasing, and the increase got applied to the office supply as opposed to the contractual service line.
Okay,
So that should be under contractual services and not where it is.
that makes more sense.
It makes more sense. Yeah, we're not buying a bunch of paper. And yeah, we're gonna print money out of City Hall. Any other questions or comments on general government? Okay, that's all we have for tonight. With that,
Am I permitted to make a general statement in?
does it relate to budget?
Yes, but globally, not necessarily to one specific department tonight.
Okay, I'll allow it.
Two things. Was one, I noticed that when it comes to negotiations, so HR, PD, fire, I'm not quite sure if it came up in, okay, let's just stay with that. That budgets in contract services may have gone up or gone down throughout various years because of negotiations. And I'm wondering, in future years, would there be a consideration, if it made any type of sense whatsoever, is take that negotiation dollars out of departments and throw them in finance or HR.
Go ahead. Now, the reason I'm laughing is, go ahead, finish your question, then Ron will,
And then the dollars pretty much sits flat for years, and it just comes out of one pocket.
got it.
So that was one. And then the other one, this may be a challenge because of timing. As I'm going through the various budget lines, I do see pay increases that go anywhere from 2.5% and up, 3, 5, 7, and even higher. So I was wondering, is it possible to provide some type of explanation or written explanation that says such a position was given 5% because there was a market salary adjustment or that there was a comparison made to other municipalities and what those municipalities were, because it from my pen and scratch, it just seems that it's all over the place. And I don't mean that in a disrespecting way. I'm just trying to grab my hands on one person gets a 7%, someone else gets a little higher, and I'm like, there's got to be a rationale
Did we
behind
not
it.
explain that, though, during the presentations on why the
No,
percentages were up?
I'm sorry?
Did we not explain that? Did the department heads not explain that enough while they were there? Because not everybody's gonna have the same percentages. Even though in a negotiated there may be other factors that impact, right? For example,
Well, I think tonight
were
was
you not
easy.
comfortable with the explanation that they gave you?
Yes, but I'm
Okay.
thinking there's departments coming up.
Yep, so if the department heads can explain it, is that not,
Yes.
Acceptable?
Yep, that's fine.
okay? Ron, go ahead, though.
So I'm with you. I would love to have a non-departmental category that just captures a lot of those costs. However, based on a lot of our funding streams, we need to have fully loaded budgets for each of our departments. So when we do request funding from the town, for example, that we do have that fully loaded budget. So that's why all of the costs do get allocated back to each budget. So like for negotiations, that invoice, legal invoice will be broken out based on employee count and which department they're in, and it gets split and allocated that way. So like for the steelworker union, a portion of it goes to the park and rec and a portion of it goes to highway sanitation based on that allocation. So that's the main reason why it goes into all of the different departments, is that way we fully capture all department costs in each bucket.
And then the second question regarding the percentages, because what we've said is, so we have contracts, we've negotiated contracts, so overall, there's a 2.5% over the duration, the lifetime of the duration of the current contract. But that doesn't mean it's 2.5 every year. Some people have front-loaded at 2.75 and then went to a 2.5, 2.25, and, different ways. So that's one thing. The other thing that we did this year differently, my decision was for non-salary, or non-union staff rather, was a 3% increase. And then you run into something unusual. You may see this again, because we settled a couple contracts last year that they had to true it up. And then that's why it looks like it went up so much, is because you had to true it up. And then you got the current raise on top of that. So, Ron, can you answer, or,
And that goes back to last committee of the whole, when the question was brought up about the pay adjustment line, the wage adjustment in the budget where there's nothing to it. That's kind of just that placeholder that we put there in case there is. We usually don't transfer the money back to the department, but it's just a placeholder to make sure that it is captured somewhere. And that is one of the things that we do put in, a non-departmental, so it's not earmarked for anybody in particular.
does that address your question? Because I don't want you to leave here thinking we didn't address your question.
No, I think that suffices for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, if in the future, when we're bringing budgets to you, if your question's not answered, if, to your satisfaction, I need you to bring it up again, and we will get you the answer
All
that
right.
that you need.
Okay, thank you.
We will address your question. Deputy Mayor Depot? Oh, I thought you had your hand up. Nope. Sorry, my apologies. Councilor Norris?
Like a kid in a candy store. The reason why I brought up if we could somehow stop the bouncing around, and I don't know the answer, is, I look at HR went up 2.1% or something like that. But even though it only went up 2%, that's because it also eliminated $10,000 out of its budget. So next year, if there is a negotiation, I don't know, that 10,000 goes back in, and now that particular line now goes up to 8%. I don't know. So I don't know if that's just me having to get used to this, or, am I just being super sensitive to dips and valleys?
No, I
Is a dip and a valley
completely,
the same?
completely understand where you're going. We try to budget to what we anticipate, but
Yeah.
again, there's gonna be those, and I think it comes with the departments explaining, like you said,
Yeah.
that I have an increase of 2.9, however, this really is an increase of 5, but it's been reduced by X or however.
Yeah.
Just like, because it can be, like the building budget, for example, it's a huge decrease, but it's really just based on reducing that contractual services.
Right.
So did that budget really decrease, or is it up? It's a little bit
Yeah,
deceiving.
yeah. All right. Thank you. It's interesting.
Nope, I'm done. I'm not going to. Yeah, I'm not gonna get in the weeds. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so we're done with that. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, council, for coming out. Thank you, Ron.